Good morning to everybody, and today we are going to present a public policy to give a solution to a great problem that is surrounding all the United States. For this, we are accompanied by two experts. The first is Ruiz, a Marine member and the first officer of the United States Police Forces and a specialist in political science. And we also have Felipe Montañez, an economist with a specialization in international relations. Well, so the main problem is that the level of violence in the USA is very high. This because the law of the legalization of firearms or guns or weapons to the civilian population of the United States. Since this law, the criminals and the people with mental problems have an accessibility into lethal weapons, with the ones that they can harm other people or harm themselves. For these reasons, the accident rates at homes, the suicide, and the homicide rates are very high in this country. Well, so the current policy for this law is that the Supreme Court of the United States in 2008 clarified on the second amendment that the legalization of firearms to civilians, except the military grade, is legal to everyone. Why the current policy does not work? This public policy is useless since the idea of the policy was to give the civilian population an opportunity to have like an individual protection. Unfortunately, this idea of politics did not turn on was expected. This because with the opportunity for the civilian population to have access to firearms, the doors were opened to gangs and criminal organizations to have access to real weapons, to real guns, with which they can intimidate, kill, and was like a very good tool for their criminal activity. Additionally, people with self-harming behaviors and mental problems also have very easy access to these guns. With this, they can commit a lot of things like suicide in a very easy and effective way. What will be the new policy? Okay, so in order to stop this problem in the US, a new public policy will be implemented, where the sale and distribution or possession of these firearms or guns will be illegal and will be closed. In this case, the only people that will have access to these guns will be the people that is not considered like a civilian, such as like the police forces, the military, or the bodyguards. So this type of persons have like a special training based on the ethical and practical use of this type of guns. Okay, so finally, like to implement this new public policy will be very necessary that the legislative branch create like this new law where this prohibition of guns and weapons is expressed.
Gun violence is a preventable public health strategy that affects communities across the United States. In 2021, we have a report of 48,830 Americans died from firearms, which is equivalent to one death every 11 minutes. Of these deaths, 26,348 were suicides, 20,958 were homicides, and also 549 were accidental injuries. Another fact is that approximately 1,000 were shot by law enforcement. Additionally, more than 200 Americans visit in 2021 the emergency room daily for non-fatal gun-related injuries. So, in the next image, we can see the rates of deaths caused by firearms in 2023. Now, in the next image, we can see the rates of deaths caused by firearms in the United States and the percentages of suicides, homicides, mass shootings, unintentional deaths, and cases where the public forces were involved. Being suicides, the most cases report, the number of firearms deaths grew over 43% between 2010 and 2020. Reaching over 45,000 deaths by the end of the decade. Between 2018 and 2023, there was a yearly average around of 603 mass shooting events. While mass shootings are often the most published events, they are not the primary source of gun violence. As of February 15 of 2024, there has been nearly 50 mass shootings this year alone, resulting in 88 deaths and over 107 injuries.
Thank you, Simon. Now, let's take a look at the economic, political, and social impacts of the proposed policy of prohibiting the sale and possession of firearms to civilians, allowing only trained professionals like police, military, and bodyguards to have access to them. This is a topic that stirs strong feelings on all sides, and we're going to break it down. So let's start with the basics. What would happen to the economy if civilians could no longer own or use guns? Well, one of the first most immediate impacts will be job loss in the gun industry. The firearm industry is a significant major employer in the United States. From manufacturers to retailers to shooting ranges, a prohibition of civilian gun ownership could lead to a massive decline in this sector, resulting in widespread job losses and economic instability. Just imagine the local economies that heavily rely on the gun industry suddenly losing a major source of income. Unemployment rates would spike, consumer spending would drop, and economic growth could slow down. And it's not just the gun manufacturers, but other industries related to them, like ammunition producers, gunsmiths, and related businesses would also take a hit. Now, enforcing this implementation, this new policy would require significant resources. Think about the funding needed for law enforcement, training programs, and legal proceedings. These costs would likely fall on taxpayers, which will potentially lead to higher taxes or reduce government spending in other areas that also need the money. Alright, let's switch gears and talk about how this policy could impact and affect society. One of the most anticipated benefits is reduction in gun violence. Fewer guns in civilian hands could lead to fewer gun-related homicides and suicides, creating an overall safer society. The emotional and financial burdens associated with gun violence could decrease significantly, benefiting victims, families, and all the community. On the flip side, there is a concern that prohibiting civilian gun ownership could lead to increased crime. Criminals might turn to alternative means of violence, like knife theft or knife attacks or assaults. And also, civilians will have no way of defending themselves without fire guns. This policy would likely deepen political polarization. Pro-gun advocates would fiercely oppose it, while anti-gun advocates would rally in support of it. The resulting political tension could decrease civil engagement and create a more divided society. There is also the matter of the Second Amendment. This policy would undoubtedly spark legal challenges and possibly would lead to a Supreme Court, which will have far-reaching implications for gun control policies in the United States. And finally, the policy would impact law enforcement deeply. There will be a greater need for law enforcement personnel and training programs, adding to the financial burden of law enforcement and overall the police agencies. So, in conclusion, the proposed policy of prohibiting civilian gun ownership is a complex issue with significant economic, social, and political impacts. While it promises benefits like reduced gun violence, increasing trust government, it also comes with challenges such as job losses and political polarization. It is a topic that requires careful consideration and a balanced debate. But as a group, we think it's worth it. Now, let's throw it back to my partner, Simon Ruiz, which will now explain the advantages and disadvantages of the proposed policy. Thank you.
Restricting access to guns can reduce the number of suicides since firearms are a lethal method. Also, can reduce homicides and other violent crimes commitment with firearms. And finally, could reduce the number of home accidents and unintentional deaths. Also, another advantage is that it can improve the public safety because a small number of weapons in circulation can reduce the perception of threat in public and in private spaces. Also, it can decrease the risk faced by police officers and the other law enforcement officers. And the last advantage is the crime reduction, because restrictions could make it more difficult for criminals to have access to firearms, trebly decreasing gun crime, and less conflict violence, because interpersonal and domestic conflicts could be less lethal without access to firearms. But also there can be some disadvantages, such as the black market and organized crime, because the criminal organization could benefit from the legal sale of weapons. Another disadvantage is the right to self-defense, because some people consider the ban violates the right to the self-defense, especially in the parts where the crime is very high. And finally, the constitutional rights, because in countries like the United States, prohibition can be seen as a violation of the Second Amendment.
With the creation of our public policy, we have also designed a poster which is made for advocating for gun control in the US. The poster shows a gun pointed directly at a person. This conveys immediately a sense of danger and threat. There is also thought put into the color scheme used in the poster. The contrast between red and black reinforces the seriousness of the message. The color red is usually associated with danger and violence, while black can also symbolize death or negativity. There is also the color white that symbolizes hope for a change that we hope to make with this policy. And finally, there is the text. It's clear and concise. Protect people, positioned above, not guns, creating a hierarchy of value. The word protect is larger and in a different color, which is white, emphasizing the importance of protecting people over guns.
In this poster, we can see a critique to the violence in the USA. Here, we can see how the population is in a discomfort from the law of the legalization of the guns. With this, we can criticize that the government in the USA protects more the law of the guns from the people's rights.
The message we want to send through our poster is to protect people, young kids, of guns, especially the firearms, because firearms are lethal. We think that the young kids are the most affected by the legalization of arms, because when they have like mental problems or any type of problem, they don't have the maturity to take like a good decision. So that like increases the suicides. Also, well, in the United States, especially the shootings in schools are very high. So we think that is a consequence of the legalization of arms. And yeah, we think that especially is to protect people and in this case like young kids.